It's Thursday, August 3rd, 2017. Our panelists today, legal expert Frank Ward and political consultant Stan McDonald. I'm Dale Jackson. You're watching Yellowhammer TV live. Welcome back to Yellowhammer TV Live. We have a great show for you today. We're going to talk a little bit about the Alabama Senate race and Donald Trump trying to fulfill one of his biggest campaign promises on immigration. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's get to the headlines. Here on Yellowhammer TV Live, we've talked a lot about this Alabama Senate race, and mostly the talk has been about Luther Strange and his allies in Washington, D.C., spending up to $8 million attacking Congressman Mo Brooks for various issues that range all over the place, from his support of the troops to oddly being a liberal, which nobody believes. Now the ads have kind of shifted. We are now watching as Mitch McConnell and his allies go after Judge Roy Moore. We'll talk about the reason he's being attacked here in just a second. But first, Stan, let's talk about what it means that there has been somewhat of a shift from Mitch McConnell and Luther Strange's people away from Mo Brooks and to Roy Moore. What does that mean? What are they telling us with this change in strategy?
Well, there's a couple of different things. I'm not entirely sure, because there's two or three things they may be trying to accomplish. But number one, they've hammered Mo so bad. At some point, you've said all you can possibly say. Now, they are continuing to hammer him. But these guys have just endless money. And, the conventional wisdom has always been, don't go negative on Roy Moore. People are scared to do that. I think possibly they're experimenting a little bit in the event they have him in the runoff. They'd rather start right now and see right now, at this stage of the game, how well it works. They are concerned. And they're concerned about Roy possibly, in their view, he might get too far ahead of them. I mean, to leave him unscathed, and he might just skate up in the upwards of 40% level, their view is possibly. Well, if I'm going to knock him back now.
If I'm Mo Brooks, and I hear that, I think to myself that they view me as done. I mean, they view me as sort of out of the race, a two-man race at this point. Is that something that Mo will have to think about and adapt his strategy?
I don't know. They're still slamming Mo really bad, too. I think they just, right now, to be honest, okay, so here's the deal. Luther does not have many more people he can pick up than he already has.
Okay.
And so his game right now is just knocking everybody
Suppression.
down. Yeah.
So this is suppressive fire. Frank, you pointed out to me, we were talking about this earlier, that it appears the strategy is to continue hammering Congressman Brooks in his congressional district,
right,
and then go after this Moore stuff elsewhere across the state. What does that mean? Why do you think they're doing that?
Well, I mean, I don't think Mo's support is super strong in some of the areas where they're now switching to attack Moore. And I think there's a lot. Stan had some really good points about this being, suppressive fire. So
if you talk to Mo, or if you talk to most people and anyone who knows anything about politics, they'll tell you he's got to run the score up in the 5th Congressional District because he's not well known enough elsewhere across the state. So I guess that's what they're trying to do here, is they're trying to just limit him a little bit here in North Alabama. And meanwhile, Moore, I don't understand this strategy. I think the conventional wisdom, which conventional wisdom is never, it means nothing now. Conventional wisdom would tell you that if Moore gets in, he's got a ceiling. He's probably going to be the easier one to beat. So the attacking of him doesn't make sense, Frank.
Well, I think the runoff period will be very short, and there's a sense there may be somewhat of a gamble here, but they're probably afraid of Moore of having a limited time in which to attack him. I think the ads that are coming out against Moore are so much more substantive, actually. than the ads against Brooks.
All right, let's talk about those ads for a second. Those ads attack Roy Moore. They are attack ads. Let's just call it what they are. They're attacking Judge Moore for running a 501c3 charity foundation and then paying himself and his family over $1 million since, I believe, 2005, between 2005 and 2013. Lots of money for travel and a bunch of other things. As Frank said, these ads are better than, Mo Brooks is a liberal, which nobody believes. These ads basically say Roy Moore raised money by being the Ten Commandment judge. Let's move on to what the substance of the ad is. Are Moore's finances in this situation stand? Is this fair game?
Well, it's fair game to talk about it, but it's also fair game for a voter and a viewer to look at it and listen and see what they think about it. And, there's nothing wrong with what Judge Moore has done in this instance. And I'm looking at the source myself and I see what this group is capable of, what they're doing to Mo Brooks, and they're saying that, he helps Nancy Pelosi leave the troops out on the field and to scale back the fight against ISIS. And I don't trust a single thing they say, although, they're able to. It looks like he does have the foundation. He does pay himself. But there's nothing illegal about that.
Well, the question here is how it's been done. $1,030,875 is how much the Moores were paid for 9 years. That's $115,000 a year. They go on and talk about how he was paid $60,000 in base compensation and $393,000 in, quote, retirement and other deferred compensation. This is a nonprofit. I mean, it's a charity organization. It's a very weird thing to dive into. Frank, you're hearing Roy Moore received retirement and other compensation from an organization he was raising money off of, basically the Ten Commandments fight. It just seems, it makes him almost look, and I'm just going to say it looks like one of those preachers on the TV. I mean, am I crazy here?
No, I don't think so. And Stan is maybe very well be right on this, that he hasn't done anything illegal. But there's a difference between what's legal and what's acceptable and respectable and okay. And I would also, to give Roy Moore his due, I don't think it's a charity. I think the ad portrays it as a charity.
Sorry,
but it
correct.
is a nonprofit. And dumping, the better part of $500,000 in your own retirement through your nonprofit is
that you work for 10 years. I mean, to me, it's just that you ran. Again, if you go into the numbers, Stan, if I go to somebody and I say to them, and again, that's what these ads are meant to do, to get us to talk about these things. Mm-hmm. If I go to someone and say, did you know in 2011, Moore paid himself $60,000 and then made $393,000 in retirement? Most people are going to go, what? And that's a character question.
I understand most people will do that, but most people need to look a little deeper sometimes too. I mean, what do they pay themselves at the Southern Poverty Law Center?
Right.
It's a not-for-profit organization, and my hunch is there's people there paid a lot more than Roy Moore was.
So you don't think this is an issue, the way you're talking?
I didn't say that, Dale, and I don't think. No, you said to me, I don't think you're crazy either. I think it's important, but I think there's a lot of people in Alabama that like what Roy Moore does. And I don't, and they're going to continue to support him. And he hasn't violated any law. I don't think he's done anything unethical here either. I think I'm just simply not going to fall for the same old crap that's directed at Mo Brooks.
So you think this is just politics as usual?
Well, who pays for the darn thing?
All right, it's the Senate Leadership Fund. It's
and those guys.
And again, that goes back to the first.
That's the fraud. That's the fraud, because
okay.
I've sent money to the National Republican Senatorial Committee before. I expect it to be used against Democrats.
Okay.
Not to destroy Mo Brooks and keep him from being able to run for House of Representatives.
But it is oddly, for a primary, it's bizarrely contentious.
The thing I disagree with you on, Stan, is you seem to be saying that sort of this is, it appears to be nothing, and I would not put the Mo Brooks Moore attacks on the same level. One seems to have substance. The other, Mo Brooks the liberal, makes no sense. Frank?
What I find ironic here is that what you can't attack, Moore may not have done anything illegal, but what you can attack him on in Alabama is what he absolutely has done that's illegal twice, and that's defy.
Right, but they're not going to touch that.
Of course they can't, because he's popular for that.
Yeah.
Right.
The problem is that a lot of the voters like it.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. You can't attack his ethical issues that got him removed from the bench twice. You don't touch, so you go after this other thing that's tangentially related to it. All right, let's move on to the next issue, staying in this race because this is where all the attention is in the state of Alabama. 7 individuals who were Trump delegates came out yesterday and endorsed Congressman Mo Brooks. Now, Stan, this I find odd for a couple of reasons. We're still fighting the who loves Trump the most, who does Trump align with the most, who loves Trump more, and now you have individuals, State Representative Ed Henry and others, who were big Trump guys, who are basically coming to Mo Brooks' defense and saying, hey, this is the guy that's more aligned with his strategy. You've seen the Mo Brooks ads that say, hey, look, I'm going to help him with the wall, filibuster, and all this other stuff in order to get things done. I mean, Mitch McConnell's fighting a two-front war between Mo Brooks and Roy Moore. Mo Brooks seems to be fighting like a 10-front war to beat back different perceptions. Does this help him at all?
Well, I think it does, yeah, because the people of Alabama support the President Trump's America First agenda. And, you have, I don't know how much money they've dumped against Mo, but it's a whole lot. I think it's probably north of 1.5 million, in my opinion, just from watching it. Yeah, and it's hurting, too. And I see people all the time say, well, I want someone that's going to support our president. And they are putting Mo's own words on there. He was a very zealous supporter of Cruz. He had very significant doubts about President Trump, wonder if anybody else around here did. And so they put that up there, and it's needful for the Trump people to say, wait a minute, Mo is supporting our agenda. So Mo's wanting to focus on what he's done now, which he's voted 95% in favor of Trump's agenda.
Now, you think those words have worked, though? I mean, I hear myself in those commercials, okay? So I get the emails every day from the Senate Leadership Fund, and they're like, on the Dale Jackson Show, on the Dale Jackson Show, on the Dale Jackson Show. And they highlight all these things that he said, but they're all during the primary or they're towards the end of the election where he'd already sent money down to Florida to help Donald Trump win down there. Frank, is this working with average people? Do they care? I mean, because this seems to be the number one issue still. I mean, we can roll through all the other things that are happening, watch the Trump White House, watch all the things going on, and this still is the number one issue?
It must be working, or they wouldn't keep dumping money in that. I hate to say exactly what the average person thinks, but it must be. Otherwise, they wouldn't continue to push this so hard.
Okay, Stan, I mean, is this going to be? We got 2 weeks left here. This is going to be it. I mean, this is where it's going to pound Trump.
Dale, I think they will continue to do that. Although to me that issue can be a little transitory because, like when he was skirmishing with Sessions a few days ago.
But that's healed. That wound appears to heal mostly because Trump can't do anything about Sessions right now. So it seems like it's just it's fixed itself.
I think that will continue, but I suspect maybe 5 days before the election you're going to see something even more ridiculous than Mo Brooks leaving troops on the field, with Nancy Pelosi. It will get even more ridiculous.
Okay. All right, that's fair enough. Let's move on to the last issue. This is one that might be near and dear to both of you guys because you are both lawyers. And one of the issues here, and we've seen this when it comes to law school admissions and things of that nature, the Trump administration put an ad out that basically said we're looking for lawyers to help us fight discrimination in colleges, which the media latched onto and said, this is about white people, and the Trump administration is racist, and they're continuing down this path of white America first and all these other things, white nationalism. And the Trump administration came out and said, hold on one second. The lawsuit that the Justice Department, even during the Obama years, was looking at was Asians and them being discriminated against and not being able to take advantage of the same thing that other minorities take advantage of. Did the media get in front of its skis on this, where they were like, "Oh, this is racist. This is racist"? Did they jump the gun here?
Maybe a bit, but if you look back at Trump's rhetoric during the election, you can see why it would be easy to jump the gun on this.
But they were wrong.
We'll have to see how it plays out.
I mean, but they were wrong. I mean, the media wanted to make this about how they were going to defend white people who were victims of affirmative action, and the Trump administration came out and said, wait a second, this is about something completely different. And I saw a thing the other day, the reason I mentioned law school, it talked about the admissions into law school based on how high their score was on the test you guys take. I think it's LSAT or something like that, and how high the scores were in the admissions. If you were an Asian with a super high score, you were still very unlikely to get into the school, but if you were an African American with a lower score, you were far more likely to get in. And this is sort of the affirmative action thing and the impacts it's had on some places. In California, they've tried to pass laws that limited the amount of Asians. This is crazy, but most people don't talk about this. They've tried and failed to pass laws that limit the amount of Asians that can go into their university system because it's over 50% Asian American, which is a disproportionate amount of the population in the state of California. Affirmative action, I mean, let's talk about that for a second. Has it ran its course? Has it served its purpose? Or is it still something that needs to be done in America in 2017?
You know, I think it's a tough issue. I don't think it's something that's simple. I think for the most part that's probably true, and I would like to see more of a focus on race-neutral measures. At the same time, you can't overlook the long history of discrimination,
right,
especially against African Americans in this country.
Stan, again, law school, this is a big portion of this, and this is where I believe the initial part came. It's Asians in Harvard, and then there's some law school issues as well. 2017, does still need to be into entry into schools, et cetera? Does it still need to be a thing?
Well, I think it's an important issue in this way. Number one, to answer your question, I do think the media jumped ahead of themselves because everything Donald Trump does, they're ready to put.
They look for the worst possible way to play it.
I think it's a really important issue because as long as we're going to have rules and laws on affirmative action, or really this is a broad question, is equality, then they should be equally enforced. And I think it's horrendous, really, for them to pass laws and to keep down Asian Americans and that kind of stuff. If we're really going to have equality, and it means equality for all.
All right, Stan, thank you very much. Frank, thank you very much. Stay tuned. We got a lot more to talk about. We'll talk about this RAISE Act, an immigration move, Trump finally playing to his base, or just a distraction. Stay tuned. You're watching Yellowhammer TV live. Welcome back to Yellowhammer TV Live. If you watch this election in 2016, immigration was a huge issue. We could talk about Jeff Sessions and his support of the president in the United States and why he supported him. We can also talk about all the things Jeff Sessions has done over the last couple of months in regard to illegal immigration. Earlier this week, he said they were going to cut some money from some of the big sanctuary cities. And now we have the president of the United States standing there with Tom Cotton and Senator Perdue from Georgia and saying we're going to put forward something called the RAISE Act. And what this is going to do is we are going to limit the number of immigrants coming in. We are going to start looking at why they're coming here. So we were going to go after, we're going to prioritize English speakers and people with skills, sort of an America First immigration plan. This, of course, went over about like you would expect it to go over in the American media. Same thing as the previous topic we discussed. This is racist. You had a reporter, Jim Acosta from CNN, get into this huge dust-up with Stephen Miller, where he's reading poems that are on the Statue of Liberty saying, what has America become? Is this a distraction by Donald Trump? Or is this a fulfillment of his promises? Or is it both? Stan, go ahead.
It's funny you asked that, Dale, because I thought the same thing to myself. Is it possibly a distraction? How serious can it be right now? You know what? I think it probably is a strategy at least. But I'll tell you one thing, and it's working because I looked at that when I saw that, and I said, that's the best piece of legislation I've seen in the past 20 years. Yeah, it makes so much sense.
It's a piece of legislation that basically does everything that he promised he was going to do in the beginning. I mean, he basically, this is the piece of legislation. Now I guess the question becomes, Frank, is there any way this gets through Congress? And this isn't a health care bill.
Yeah.
Now you've got a bill where you're limiting immigration, and even some of the hardliners who were, or not hardliners, excuse me, some of the GOP softs, the squishes and things like that, they seem to be on board with some of this. Can you get it through Congress? Because this is not going to be an executive order thing. This is an actual law they're trying to get passed.
There's certainly a non-zero chance that it gets through, but I'd be very surprised. But, you know, major pieces of legislation often have to come up in multiple Congresses, so we'll see. And to go to your question as to whether it's a distraction or if this is trying to fulfill on Trump's promises, probably both. I think. I think that's true. But you know, I am not a conservative, and my initial reaction whenever legislation comes out is the same as anybody, to look at the other side and be skeptical. I'm actually looking at this and seeing, I think there's some positive things, and I hope they reach across the aisle, and maybe we can actually get some
limits on refugees, and also propose to eliminate certain pathways to family-based immigration, stipulating that only spouses and minor children of U.S. citizens and permanent residents would be eligible for green cards. And what they're talking about here is just this idea that one guy comes in, and then you just back the truck up and bring in every single person and grandfathers and great uncles and all these other things, and one guy can bring in 20 different people. And what they want to do is sort of limit that. The focus on English is what's drawn the fire, because it's easy to get upset about, and because you only want English people. And Jim Acosta to Stephen Miller yesterday said, you only want people from Australia and Great Britain, ignoring that there are large parts of the world that speak English outside of those parts. Were you surprised by the dust-up between the CNN reporter in the White House yesterday? I don't think I was, Stan.
Well, I wasn't surprised, but I'll tell you that Stephen Miller is a guy to watch.
Former Sessions guy.
Yes, that guy really takes no prisoners. He's a young version of having the audacity that Trump does, but he's got about 10 times more intellect than Trump does, and he's Trump's a smart guy, but you need to watch Stephen Miller. That guy's going to be a lot of fun to see for a long time.
And 10 times the intellect of Trump, which means the intellect of an average human being. Just joking. Frank, I'll let you respond. Were you surprised? Do guys like Jim Acosta, this thing that Jim Acosta did yesterday, where he just blows up and they get into this big dust-up, does that help the Trump administration? Because to me, it fuels the media's narrative, or the narrative the Trump administration wants, that the media is trying to kill him.
Yeah, and there's so much to criticize Trump over, but when you take a press conference and you're not really asking a question, that certainly hurts the narrative. It's
and
not
you're reading poems off your phone.
Right, which is a great poem, by the way.
But he didn't even know. The thing that killed me about that, the funniest thing about that whole thing, is he's so passionate about this thing. It says so on the Statue of Liberty, and he's like, now let me read it off my phone. I mean, that's how much it was a battle for battle's sake. And next time they take those cameras out of that press briefing, they can look at Jim Acosta and say, "You're why."
Something, and like I said, I could see both sides on the immigration issue, but I wonder if this had been in effect when my ancestors immigrated, if I would even be here.
You're making the argument for it. All you're doing is fighting the argument that we should do this thing after all. Let's take a quick time out. Thank you very much for being here. More coming up. When we come back, we'll find out what these guys think the biggest story of the day is. Stay tuned. It's Yellowhammer TV Live. Welcome back to Yellowhammer TV Live. As we wrap the show up, we'll figure out what the biggest story of the day is for these guys. Let's go first. Before we get to that, I want to talk about something real quick. YellowhammerNews.com had a poll yesterday where they said, who's your pick to win the Republican primary for the United States Senate? Mo Brooks, 45%, Luther Strange, 20%, Roy Moore, 34%. Again, a little less than 8,000 votes. Online poll doesn't really mean all that much. But Yellowhammer News, very conservative readership. There might be something there. Stan, what's the biggest story of the day for you?
The National Center for Public Policy published a study recently, or a finding, that Al Gore uses 34% more electricity in his house than the average American. He's got a 10,000 square foot home in Belmead up in Nashville. And this guy continues to be a hoax and a farce.
You know, it kills me because the biggest story for me today is that you stole my story. that would be the biggest story of the day. I mean, I read that story, and you know what I found funny about that? It's like 20 times what the average American family does, and I believe it was the amount of energy that 6 or so American families use every year just to heat his pool. Just to heat his pool. Frank, I know you're an environmentalist.
No, I'm chopping at the bits. It's perfectly fine to point out hypocrisy. Yeah. That doesn't change the underlying science.
Okay, you can make that argument too, but Al Gore
that's an ad hominem argument, which is valid that he's being hypocritical.
And he's got a movie coming out, and he's all yesterday. He was on CNN the other day, a full-hour special, MTV last night. Frank, what's the biggest story of the day for you?
I would also point out that I should be putting more in savings than I am, and I don't, and that doesn't mean savings is a bad idea.
Oh, okay, all right. So what's the biggest story?
The biggest story, and this I think will actually be, in retrospect, a big thing. Yesterday, it came out that folks in the U.S. had, using the CRISPR technique, genetically modified an embryo to cure a congenital heart defect. And we're going to see that and the whole idea of the designer babies over the next 10, 15 years.
What happens here when we have stuff like this is there will be a piece of legislation to figure out how they're going to control who gets to genetically modify babies.
Well, it's because it's germline modification. That is, it's passed on down.
Right.
Where it's much more controversial than genetically modifying, my heart or
right, but and we only got a couple seconds left here. They'll do things like be able to line out Down syndrome and things of that nature. I mean, as they move forward, this is the goal here with designer babies. As I said, Stan stole my biggest story today, so that's how big of a story that is. We will talk to you tomorrow on Friday. Don't miss it. It's Yellowhammer TV Live.